Hey everyone. Tonight, we plunge into the chilling depths of the home alone nightmare. Not the heartwarming tales of mischievous kids, but true accounts of terror when the sanctuary of one's own home becomes a hunting ground. Imagine the creak in the floorboards, the shadow in the hallway, the chilling realization that you are not, in fact, alone. These are the stories that will make you question every quiet night, every fleeting shadow, and every sound that goes bump in the dark. Lock your doors, pull your blankets tight, and prepare for 5 disturbing tales of unwelcome presences. The Sisters' Echo. Liam, a 30-year-old man who shared a 2-story mother-daughter house with his sister, often found himself alone. His sister frequently stayed with her boyfriend 20 miles away, leaving Liam to the quiet solitude of their home. Though he believed he was past the age for such anxieties, sometimes the silence would prickle his skin. One night, as darkness consumed his living room, illuminated only by the flickering light of a scary movie, Liam found himself unusually jumpy. His upstairs living area, an open layout encompassing the dining room and kitchen, left a vast expanse of darkness behind his couch. He admitted to casting nervous glances over his shoulder, a habit he suspected wasn't unique to him, even at 30. After the movie's credits rolled, he performed his nightly ritual, brushing his teeth, extinguishing every light, and settling into bed. His peace, however, lasted only 2 hours. He awoke around 1 a.m. disoriented, unsure of what had disturbed his sleep. Then from downstairs, he heard it. A voice, unmistakably his sister's. It sounded urgent, intense, and unmistakably from inside the house, not a distant call from outside. Grogginess still clouding his mind, Liam struggled to decipher her muffled shouts. Was she calling for him? Arguing with her boyfriend? Driven by a confused sense of duty, he pushed himself from his bed, stepping into the absolute blackness of the hallway. He fumbled for the light switch, bathing the hall in a sudden glow, and moved into the living room, where the disembodied voice called his name again, clearer this time. Descending the dark stairs, Liam yelled back, his own voice sounding distant in the echoing silence. His mind, still heavy with sleep, fumbled for the downstairs light switch in the foyer, but found nothing. He stumbled down a short hallway leading to his sister's kitchen, finally locating a switch. With a flick, the kitchen and adjacent living room were bathed in a dim, slowly brightening light. No one was there. Not his sister, not her boyfriend. He checked her bedroom. It too was empty. Liam's voice boomed in the silent space, calling her name. No reply came, but moments after his shout, a distinct medium-weight thud echoed from his sister's bedroom. The same room he had just confirmed was empty. Terror, cold and swift, seized him. He scrambled back up the stairs like a child, fleeing to the sanctuary of his own bedroom, where his phone lay. He desperately tried calling his sister, but she didn't answer. Locked in his room, Liam wrestled with the horrifying possibility that he had hallucinated everything. He eventually succumbed to an uneasy sleep. The morning brought texts from his sister, asking why he had called her at 1 a.m. When he asked if she had been home, her answer confirmed his worst fear. No, she was still at her boyfriend's house. He cautiously ventured downstairs to his sister's bedroom, searching for whatever could have fallen, but the floor was bare. Liam desperately wanted to believe it was all a hallucination, clinging to that explanation as the less horrific alternative. Yet, the unwavering clarity of his memory, the vividness of her voice, and that distinct thud, all from a mind not prone to such episodes, left him with a terrifying question. If it wasn't real, why did it feel so real? Sometimes, the most unsettling fears are the ones that force us to question the very fabric of our reality, leaving us adrift in a sea of doubt. The Silent Watcher. As a child, David was often left to his own devices. His single mother, an RN with an unpredictable schedule, and an older brother off at college meant frequent nights alone in their house. One particular weekend night, his friend Molly had come over, filling the house with the easy chatter of youth as they watched movies. But after she departed, leaving David to hold down the fort. The quiet quickly settled back in. He continued to watch TV, tucked into his bed upstairs. His bedroom, situated next to the backyard, offered a clear line of sound to the deck below. So, when a harsh, grating sound of a chair being dragged across the wooden planks sliced through the night, David heard it. He rose, peering out the window. A figure sat on one of the deck chairs, obscured by shadow but unmistakably present. "Molly?" he called, thinking it must be her, barely 10 minutes having passed since her departure. The figure slowly looked up, a male silhouette, still and intentional in its posture, staring directly at his window. It wasn't Molly. A jolt of primal fear seized David, and he instinctively pulled away from the window, seeking refuge in the darkness of his room. He didn't recognize the shape in the gloom. He frantically texted his close friends in their group chat, a desperate attempt to confirm if this was some elaborate prank. Those who replied denied it, asking what he was talking about. Deep down, David knew none of his friends would pull such a terrifying stunt. Scared senseless, but still consumed by a morbid curiosity, he slowly crept back to the window. The person was still there, sitting, looking up at his window. He was clearly a male, and he had definitely seen David. David scurried away again, switching off his TV. He curled into a tight ball on his bed, arms wrapped around his knees. The darkness enveloped him, and he dared not even illuminate his phone screen, fearing the light would betray his presence. Every movement was stifled, every breath held, as the open window threatened to carry any sound he made to the silent watcher outside. He wanted the figure to believe the room was empty. 5 agonizing minutes crawled by, a solid eternity of stillness. He highly doubted the man would still be there. Finally, mustering a sliver of courage, David crept back to the window. A part of him died as he saw the man still there, still looking up. Instead of retreating, a desperate bravery surged within him. "What do you want?" he whispered down to the figure. The man's shoulders began to heave, a silent internal convulsion of laughter. Then, a faint whistling sound, a strained, high-pitched wheezing escaped him. It was unnatural, not a full-throated laugh, but a raspy exhale that evoked madness. "Please go away," David pleaded, pulling away from the window once more. He returned to his bed, a knot of fear tightening in his stomach. For some inexplicable reason, he was terrified to call the police. It was a cocktail of youthful indecision, fear of overreacting, and a deep, instinctual need to remain invisible rather than escalate the terrifying encounter. He left his room and sat at the top of the stairway, listening. Then, the sickening sound of the back door being pushed, a clear attempt to force entry. He scrambled back to his room, hiding again. He was only 14. What else could he do? Soon, the front door's doorknob rattled, the man now trying to breach that entrance as well. Thankfully, he quickly gave up. David rushed to close his window and draw the curtains. The chilling realization struck him. If the doors hadn't been locked, he could have been killed. At 14, he was skinny, weak, and certainly no fighter. He remained barricaded in his room until his mother's return around 9 a.m. When he recounted the night's horrors, her anger at his failure to call 911 was, in hindsight, completely justified. It was one of many youthful failures that continued to haunt him. The unseen threats that lurk in the periphery often feel more dangerous than the ones we can clearly identify, reminding us that sometimes the greatest terror lies in the unknown. The unlocked sanctuary. Michael, a 10-year-old in a family of 5, found his quiet Friday night abruptly shattered. He was engrossed in a Star Wars video game in his room when a harrowing sound pierced the air. His mother's distraught cries. A dreaded phone call had come, informing his parents that his older brother, 14, had been hit by a car. The news sent a tremor of fear through the household. Though his brother's leg was broken, the specifics of the call were a blur to Michael. All he knew was that his parents, gripped by panic, hastily donned their coats, scooped up his 5-year-old little sister, and, after a quick assurance from Michael that he was okay to stay home alone, rushed out the door. "Michael, worried for his brother but also reluctant to see him in such a vulnerable state, stayed behind. He understood his parents' decision. They wouldn't leave his younger sister alone. Before leaving, his father, trying to calm his frantic mother, insisted their son would be fine. This reassured Michael, who dismissed his mother's reaction as typical parental dramatics. He returned to his game, playing for another couple of hours. It was well past midnight, far beyond his usual bedtime, when he heard the distinct sound of the front door opening. His bedroom door was closed. He turned off his TV and PlayStation, crawling into bed with his Game Boy, straining to hear his parents' voices, or perhaps his brother's, but only silence met his ears. After several minutes of hearing nothing, not even footsteps on the stairs, a dreadful premonition settled over him. He quietly opened his door and crept to the banister overlooking the living room. The lights were off, but three tall figures stood in the dimness of the living room. Their unnatural silence, their imposing alien body language, and Michael's immediate gut instinct screamed that they were not his family. Petrified, Michael froze for an agonizing second. Then, with a quiet desperation, he backed into his room, shutting the door as softly as he could, but knew it wasn't quiet enough. He imagined the faint click echoing in the stillness, surely audible to those below. He darted to his closet, opening it silently, stepping inside and pulling the door shut. He burrowed himself behind a mound of boxes and bags of clothes, well hidden from immediate view. A short period, which felt like an eternity, passed in suspended animation. He anticipated the inevitable, and then his bedroom door slowly creaked open. In that chilling moment, a raw, primal fear told him he was going to die. Footsteps entered the room. He couldn't tell if it was one person or two. He heard the footsteps move towards his bed, followed by the faint rustling of his covers. Silence fell again. Then the footsteps approached the closet door. More silence, a tense few seconds, and then the closet door opened. His heart hammered against his ribs, lodged in his throat. He remained absolutely still, holding his breath. The door remained open for what felt like an eternity, a good 20 seconds of suffocating silence. Michael did not look up, did not move. Then, the door slowly closed again. Footsteps receded from the door, then exited the room. He finally dared to look up, a sickening realization dawning on him. From his crouched position behind the bags and boxes, he might have been visible. It was a standoff between a predator and a frozen prey, without a word spoken. A silent judgment passed. An hour later, he heard the blessed sounds of his parents returning. He scrambled downstairs to them. The front door stood ajar, left open by the intruders who had stolen numerous valuables from their house. It had been a night that spiraled from bad to worse for their family. In their frantic haste to reach the hospital, his parents had forgotten to lock the door, their fear for their son overriding all normal instincts. Michael was incredibly lucky not to have been killed or kidnapped. He often looked back, still wondering if the person who opened the closet door and stood there for 20 seconds had truly seen him hiding. Perhaps it was merely a robber, not a kidnapper or a murderer. Or perhaps, by some sheer twist of fate, he had simply remained unseen, narrowly escaping a horrific fate. The world can shift in an instant, proving that the most profound terror often arises from our own vulnerability when the unexpected crashes into our ordinary lives. The lure of the woods. In Newark, Ohio, a teenager named Alex, an only child, found himself unexpectedly alone for an entire week. His parents, not typically given to travel, were on a trip funded by his mother's wealthy friend. Their house, nestled on a quiet road with infrequent traffic, bordered dense woods in the backyard. A sprawling deck overlooked these woods, and the yard boasted a fish pond and an above-ground pool. It was a Thursday night in July 2013. Alex was out on the deck, unwinding with some weed and music playing from his speaker. That's when it began. He thought he heard a voice from the woods. He lowered the music, listening intently, but it didn't repeat, so he turned the volume back up, Moments later, with the music loud again, the voice returned. This time, he killed the music entirely and listened longer. The voice called out again from the woods, confirming he wasn't imagining things. It was a male voice, calm yet insistent, saying, "Hey, over here." The voice was distant, perhaps 20 to 30 yards from the deck, the approximate edge of the woods. Alex initially dismissed it, imagining kids playing manhunt. Then the voice called again. "Hey, over here! We need help." This time, the voice was too deep to be a child's, and the plea for help, though vague, was instantly unsettling. A prickle of discomfort turned into a chilling suspicion. Were these shouts directed at him? The voice solidified his fear with its next call. "Straight in front of you. Please come help us." The voice was now unmistakably coming from directly in front of him, in the woods. This was no game. Reluctantly, Alex called back. "Who is that?" The response came instantly, chillingly composed. "We just need help. We're stuck in the woods." "What does that mean?" Alex asked, his voice wavering. "Just please, come help straight in front of you," the voice replied. Alex, still high and perhaps more trusting than he should have been, rose from his seat, descended the deck steps, and walked towards the woods. "I'm coming. Where are you?" he called out. "Right in front of you. I see you," the voice responded instantly. "Wait, are you alone or with someone?" Alex asked, but this time, there was no answer. He stopped halfway to the woods, a cold dread washing over him. A bad feeling, a deeply unsettling intuition, told him something was terribly wrong. The voice had been too composed, too well-timed, too deliberately vague, like a hunter luring its prey. His altered state, a subtle effect of being high, had made him vulnerable. Perhaps the threat knew this. He began to walk backward, not daring to turn his back on the ominous tree line. It took him that long to realize the utter strangeness of the situation. He reached the deck, and the voice remained silent. If they truly saw him and this was genuine distress, they would have called out, "Where are you going?" At the very least, they knew he was onto their game, and who knew how many were in there? 1, 3, a dozen? Getting stuck in the woods made no sense, especially if they could see him. Was a shirt caught on a branch? He hurried inside, locking all the doors as a desperate precaution. He tried to relax in his living room, still feeling the lingering effects of the weed, which had initially made him more trusting. But then, the voice returned, closer now, definitely in the backyard, no longer confined to the woods. He heard splashing, either from the pool or the pond. He rushed to the window, peering out into the darkness. At first, nothing. Then, the chilling declaration, "I see you," followed by a low, satisfied laugh. He spotted him, at least one man, hidden behind the pool, only his head visible. It was too dark to make out features beyond his dark, medium-length hair. The man's deliberate stalking first from afar, then the backyard, then right at the window, and the voice location mismatch were profoundly unsettling. He closed the blinds, hoping the man would lose interest if not entertained. This was a sick, deranged individual who reveled in psychological torment. His breaking point came with a horrible, aggressive banging on the very window where he had just closed the blinds. The man on the other side was screaming, "Help!" Alex snapped, "F off, you freak! The police are coming!" He screamed, his voice raw, repeating the threat over and over, trying to sound wilder than his tormentor. On the other side of the glass, the man's laughter began, fading away as Alex assumed he was finally retreating, not in fear, but with a predator's satisfaction. Alex sank onto the couch, trembling, shaking, breathless. The man seemed to have truly given up. Despite the terror, he still managed a good night's sleep, as the weed often helped him sleep. He often wondered how differently he might have handled the situation if he hadn't been high. The incident left him with a deep-seated paranoia, forever questioning whom he would open his door to. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers lurk not in the supernatural, but in the calculated malevolence of humanity. The Intruder Beneath. Ethan, 23 years old and still living at home with his parents, was enjoying a quiet afternoon playing basketball in his front yard. Mid-dribble, he glanced up at an upstairs window of his house and froze. Standing there was a woman, a stranger. Not his mother, not his sister. Just a random, unfamiliar face. The unnerving part was her stillness, the unnatural quiet of her presence, and the lack of visible emotion as she watched him. It was like she was studying him. As soon as she realized he saw her, she dipped out of sight. A surge of adrenaline propelled Ethan inside. He raced upstairs, checking the lounge room, then every single bedroom, the bathroom, every closet. Nothing. He scoured the downstairs living room, kitchen, dining room, another bedroom, more closets, still empty. Finally, he descended to the basement, a small space with a couple of couches, a bar, and 2 closets. Few places to hide. As he approached the last unchecked spot, the second closet door, a chilling certainty settled over him. If she wasn't here, where could she be? He yanked the door open like ripping off a Band-Aid, simultaneously pushing himself into the closet, ready to surprise her. But he met only the resistance of coats and hangers. Confusion warred with an unshakable conviction. He wouldn't question his sanity. He had definitely seen that woman. It wasn't something you could vividly imagine. A faint, earthy smell, like damp soil and old clothes, lingered subtly in the air. A fleeting, unnoticed cue that suggested her presence even when she was unseen. He stormed back to the middle floor and screamed at the top of his lungs, demanding that whoever was in the house, "Get the F out!" His shout was so loud it brought his next-door neighbor to their door, concerned. Ethan, breathless and frantic, explained he had just seen a woman at their upstairs window. The neighbor, a kind man, stepped in to help him search again. When they found nothing, Ethan assumed she must have slipped out the back door, which he had unlocked earlier to retrieve his basketball. After his neighbor left, Ethan locked all the doors, called his parents, and recounted the unbelievable story. They weren't thrilled, but instructed him to check if anything was stolen. Luckily, all valuables seemed to be in place. That night, sleep was a distant dream. His mind raced, replaying the bizarre events. Few could relate to seeing a stranger inside their own home. Yet, his restlessness, ironically, proved to be his salvation. He was finally beginning to drift into a fitful sleep when he heard faint noises from the other side of his bed. The fan overhead muffled some sounds, but these were distinctly human-like. He turned to his other side, and there she was. She was emerging from under his bed. She stood up tall beside him, a gaunt, dirty-looking woman, her dark hair matted, her eyes wide and wild. A foul, acrid smell, like stale sweat and something vaguely chemical, now clung to her. Ethan screamed, louder than he had before. He lunged out of bed, tackling her to the floor, his hand instinctively closing around her throat as he demanded to know who she was. At that very moment, the doorbell rang. His neighbor, Ethan, summoning a terrifying strength, dragged the struggling woman, whose claw-like hands raked his arm, leaving 2 scars, to the front door. He opened it, and his neighbor, without a word, stepped in to help him restrain her. As they waited for the police, the woman screamed and cursed at them, her threats filled with a chilling, desperate rage. She looked and acted like someone suffering from severe withdrawals, a person unmoored from reality, who had wormed her way into his life like a virus. When the officers arrived, one immediately recognized her. Her name, quite coincidentally, was Karen, and they had dealt with her multiple times before. It was profoundly satisfying to watch her being led to the police car. Ethan expressed his profound gratitude to his neighbor for his swift intervention. That night, his mind still raced, but interwoven with the lingering shock was an overwhelming, inexplicable feeling of satisfaction. Perhaps it was the primal triumph of survival, the realization that even in the most terrifying of intrusions, you possess a strength you never knew. Always trust your instincts, for they are the oldest warnings against the darkness that can lurk just beyond your perception.